So, as you saw from the title, this video is going to be about teaching you guys about the very basics of fighting games. I've had a lot of people in my life ask me how to play fighting games and if I could teach them how to do it. They've also asked me how do you get better at some of them, because fighting games is really one of those skills that when you know the fundamentals, you're able to carry it along with you to a lot of other ones. Another reason that I wanted to do this is because I've tried looking for videos myself that could try and explain these concepts to someone who is quite literally walking into their first fighting game. And from my research, I can never really find one that I can just send over without giving them a bunch of information beforehand. And sometimes I'm looking for videos that can teach people how to do inputs and all that, but quite frankly, I don't really ever see a lot of this, and the ones that I do see are usually no insult, but quite low quality, and generally just like don't have the best way of displaying the information for new people. So I've taken on the job of doing it myself and hoping that the people that are in need of this video or looking for this video will be able to find this. Understand that if you're already at a basic level of understanding things like fighting games and inputs, then this is just probably not the video for you. My intention here is to explain how to operate these games on a fundamental level, but to also show what you need to know, and when you're walking into these games, what you can do to make sure you have the best time understanding the game on its mechanical level. Now, one thing I'm gonna say right here is because I have heard a lot of excuses from people on my side of things who say that they want to get into fighting games, but I've had people say to me that they'll start to get into fighting games when they get an arcade stick. So you're telling me you're gonna spend £100 on a controller for a game that you still don't even know how to play yet?
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, oh, okay.
So the knowledge explored in this video is mainly going to consist of these. If you're coming into this already knowing what pretty much all of these are, except the last one, then this just might not be the right video for you. Now, the information that I'm going to be given is sort of going to apply for all of these games. I'll be mainly focusing on specifically games that are playing on a 2D space, but this does not mean that some of this information is not applicable for some 3D titles like Tekken and Soul Calibur. As we've seen, 2D has become a topic of discussion in a lot of these 3D games, so it might be interesting so that you can understand it a little bit more. I highly suggest that if you're watching this and you're wanting to get into a fighting game and you have a fighting game in your game library, it might be an idea to go to the training mode so that you can follow along with some of the things in this tutorial. After you feel like you have a rough grasp of like everything in this tutorial, I would also suggest doing the tutorial in your selected game. I'm only here trying to teach you the fundamentals and not the actual mechanics of how to play each game, since that is different for each game, and I'm not trying to be here for hours. So we have movement and blocking. So I don't want to treat people like idiots when they're watching this, since we have a rough idea of how this movement works. You press forward to go forward, hold back to go back, you press up to jump, and then if you apply direction like forward and backwards with this, you can jump forwards and you can jump backwards. Now if you double tap forwards, you'll get a dash, and if you double tap backwards, you'll get a back dash, and if you hold down, you'll crouch. Now this won't apply to all games, but some 2D games have air dashing. Now this is just a mixture of adding your jump and your dashing together. This can go both ways. As you can see, that was fairly simple. We got movement down. Good job, everyone. Moving on to blocking. Now this is mainly applying to games where you only have to hold back to block. So there are roughly 3 types of attacks when it comes to blocking. You have highs, mids, and lows as your main 3. Starting off with mids, mid attacks are generally attacks that you can block while standing or crouching. Mainly in 2D games specifically, these moves are just blocked by holding back. Then we have highs. Highs are generally 2 specific categories. You have aerials or jump normals, and overheads. Aerials can only be blocked while standing. Aerials generally be enemies who are crouching or blocking low. And to end off the blocking section, we have lows. Lows are, well, they're low attacks. They hit low, so you'd want to block low in these cases, and you can do so by holding down and then back. You know that feeling when you open up a command list and you see. So this part is where we start to explore the different avenues in order for you to be able to pick up a character, look at their command list, and identify what you can do with them in order to help you operate them. In order to help you out with this in the easiest way possible, I'm going to introduce the Numpad Notation. Now, for people who are looking at this and don't know what it is, that's what I'm here to tell you, and this is the easiest way to translate directions into inputs. If you're choosing to give up at this step, then I can't help you. Now, just a quick history lesson into why this was used. Basically, back when the internet was still kinda... people weren't able to communicate like they could nowadays. They needed something that could go beyond just language and could be readable to someone who plays fighting games. That is why this notation was used for a lot of fighting games. So for many of these examples, I'll be providing you with different footage from different games and be providing you with diagrams to help you understand how to execute these. We're going to be starting off with the most simple and most recognizable command, which on our notation will be 236. And that is a 236 motion with any punch. Now hopefully when you go into whatever game you're playing, you'll be able to recognize if something is a punch or a kick. It will generally say through icons like these. So as we can see from this command, we need to do almost a quarter circle forward. What you want to do is you want to start off at 2, hit 3, and then go straight to 6. As you can see, it follows the same circular motion as the diagram. But let's do the demonstration like I did in the other parts. As you can see, we've got the inputs at the bottom just to make sure that it's very clear and concise. You want to start off down, diagonal, and then right, and then pressing your button. In our case, because it's punches, we have 3 punches to pick from, which decide on the distance. In this case. Now we want to practice you being able to do this consistently, so we want you to ramp up the speed that you're able to hit these directions and execute this command. One important thing to keep in mind is that when you are looking at these commands, it will always assume that you are on the left side, which is the player 1 side. And since this character has another move that is just 236 but reversed, so in this case 2, 1, and 4, if we do that, we will get hairball. Just like that, you're able to do 2 inputs. Like I said, once you've done it one way, you are then able to get the other way. Moving on to our next command, we'll be looking at the Shoryuken motion, or in our case, 623. Now this input is a little trickier when it comes to our standard 236s and our 214s, since when we're doing this command, we want to do it in the shape of like a Z. We want to go straight from 6 to 2 and then to 3. Like I said before, the best thing to do is just practice going over these commands until you're comfortable just throwing them out. It really is about what is just more comfortable for you in the end. Ooh, game change. Now this next input is not as bad as you might think when you just say the numbers outright. So we have 63214 and 41236. We're going from our quarter circles and we're turning it into a half circle. So we're going from left, diagonal, down, diagonal, right. This also applies vice versa. Now we have the input that I think is like one of the hardest for a lot of new players, and it's the 360. So mainly this input is associated with a lot of grappler characters. And so for a lot of these moves, you have to be right next to the enemy for them to hit. This is also one of those commands where I feel a lot of beginner players do the command too slowly. So what ends up happening is when the input is asking you to press up, a lot of people jump because they're doing it too slowly. It is very important that you are able to sort of whip this command out whenever you need it. I would say the best thing to do is to first start off with taking on a similar motion to what we did before with the half circle, because all you're doing now is adding on 3 more directions onto it. But I will say, if you can't get it, this is one of the harder ones for newer players. Moving on from inputs, we now have charge motions. Charge commands usually look like this, and so a lot of people can get confused and think that you need to input this immediately. Charge motions require you to hold down a direction for a certain amount of time and then hit another direction and then press your button. A lot of players generally don't like playing charge characters because it requires you to wait in order for you to get your move out rather than just executing the input and getting it out. Using Funk from Street Fighter, I'm going to do the same things that I have been doing throughout the video. So looking at the controller at the top and then looking at the inputs that are on the left side, you can see that we're holding down back, and the reason for this is because when you are charging, you want to also be blocking. Then after that you hit right and your designated button for the command to come out. And just like going from left to right, the same applies for down and up as well. So once you've crouched and charged that for some time, all you need to do is press up and your button. It's very important for you to know that depending on the game that you are playing, the charge timing can be different. For example, in Under Night, the timing for it is 0.5 seconds. Charge motions are pretty interchangeable. They generally abide by the same rules depending on whatever the input is. Now to finish off on our input section, we now have supers. Now supers are pretty different from game to game. They generally stay the same when it comes to anime games. But a lot of these super inputs require you to do double motions. So say for example, sometimes they want you to do 2-3-6 twice and then hit a button. Some games like Skullgirls only require you to do the motion and then input 2 buttons instead of 1. Some games require you to do the input and then hit 3 of the buttons. It really does depend on what game you're playing. Links versus Gatlings. So I feel this is a piece of information that even some intermediate players may not be aware of, or they might just not know the names of what I'm talking about. But I feel like this helps a lot of people identify what they like about certain fighting games. So we should probably start off with the easiest one to explain, which is the magic system, but a lot of people probably know this as Gatlings from Guilty Gear. So Gatlings, essentially, for most games, allow you to press a button and then cancel any attack into another attack of equal or higher strength. Now there are games where there's only one way that you can chain these attacks. Generally, it allows you to ramp up in your combos by using a weak attack and then slowly chaining into your stronger ones. I'd say games that mainly use Gatlings usually have a lot more for you to remember when it comes to combos, and I think that's because generally a lot of it is just this move is hit, so now I go into this move. Some people really like that, some people don't. I think a lot of it comes down to combo length as well. Some people don't want to have to go into a game and remember strings on strings of combos. Then you have links. Links essentially works off of something called hit stun. When an opponent is hit, or they are getting hit, you then have a certain amount of time to try and link together another button that can then combo from that first one. While it may sound difficult based on how I'm explaining it, the good thing about links is that it is a very universal mechanic depending on the game, and usually every character is able to follow that sort of sequence. To give a small demonstration, the generic Gatling would be light, medium, and then heavy, either punch or kicks. If we tried to do that in Street Fighter with Jury, which is a game based on links, you cannot do this. Each hit must be separated so that it has enough time to go into the next one. And of course, like I said before, this is all based on the amount of hit stun that it does. Links are mainly common in Street Fighter and King of Fighters. So unlike Gatlings where you can press generally whatever button in like a sequence, I do think for new players coming into fighting games, links are a little bit more harder to get used to just because there is a timing element to them. And even then, in some anime games you may have characters that abide by link rules. I'd say the best way for you to decide if you prefer links or Gatlings is to just play games that have one and another one that has the other. I would say maybe pick up Street Fighter 4 or Street Fighter 5 depending on what characters interest you, and then maybe pick up something like Blaze Blue, Skullgirls, or Under Night for Gatlings. As I know, there is only one example of a game that is able to incorporate both of these systems into their gameplay. This game was Street Fighter X Tekken. The way that you would tag out to your teammate would be by using the Gatling, but then you would do your combos through the standard link structure. But if you wanted to play that game, you'd need to download a mod that would allow you to play online, because Windows Live was a thing that existed. Now, I sort of made this generic information panel for the reasons of, even with everything we've been over in the video, there are still different mechanics that I feel may help a lot of new players help understand their games a little bit better. But of course, I also want to put pieces of advice in here for people who are brand new to fighting games, or just information for people who are playing fighting games in general, even on a casual level. So I'd say number one is probably going to be just a piece of advice for all those. So I would say my first point is mainly going to be a piece of advice, and then everything else is going to be technical. Number one, please do not jump online if you cannot play the game. This is something that I've had quite a number of friends do, and I'm not going to lie, it gets on my nerves when they then sit there and say, well, I couldn't do anything. Yeah, it's because you picked up the game 3 minutes ago and immediately wanted to go online. What the fuck did you think was gonna happen? Please spend some time in the training mode, at least understanding what you can do. Because, well, you generally find that a lot of people get angry at these type of games because they just don't understand why they're getting hit or what they can do in situations that a lot of beginners may feel trapped in, or they feel that there's just no counterplay to something.
Fuck off. Fucking shit game, dude.
And despite me saying that I was only gonna have 1 point that does it, I'm a liar. Point 2 is please understand what your character does well. I think it's very important that as players, we understand what our characters do. So, you know, if you're in a situation and you don't know what your character can do about it, it's the best option is to just find out. There's so many videos out there letting people know what their character can do. There's character discords like dedicated to one character. So I will not tolerate anyone saying that, oh, I don't know where to find it, unless it is a brand new game or just niche. It might just not have a lot of players either. Alright, now going to actual pieces of mechanical advice that will be very helpful. So I want to start off with a word that I used earlier on in the video, and these are overheads. Now, all their moves generally are overheads, that is true. But an overhead attack generally refers to a move that is executed while both players are standing, rather than one jumping. Now, like I said before, an overhead attack is generally considered a high, so it must be blocked while standing. But the term generally refers to moves that you use while on the ground. Similar to jumping attacks, overheads are mainly used to sort of break the flow of the enemy blocking, especially if they're just blocking low. However, be aware that a lot of overheads are much slower than your standard attacks, and that is because generally they are made to let your opponent know that, hey, this is going to be a high attack. Next you have grabs. So the reason why I didn't put this in the main part of the video is because grabs generally change from game to game. Not every game will have the grab being the same 2 buttons, or sometimes even 1 button. Now, grabs are pretty important because it beats blocks. Grabs are generally used if an opponent is blocking too often, so sometimes you can just run up and grab. The only way to really escape a grab is to press the grab button at the same time, but this also depends on the game. Sometimes it's different, sometimes it's not. Now we have something called a cross-up, and so a cross-up is generally when you attack. Generally when you're attacking the opponent, and let's say you are jumping at them, sometimes when you jump over them, because the sides have completely changed now, the blocking will be completely different. So instead of holding back, they will need to hold the other direction. Cross-up attacks are mainly used to force players to quickly switch their blocking direction from left to right or right to left, or else they'll get hit. It is most commonly used when it comes to jumping attacks, since it's the easiest way to sort of be ambiguous and go over their head, so that the defender has to guess sort of which direction you're going to be coming at them. Well, that was it. I hope that I was able to teach you guys something. If not, I'm sorry for wasting your time. Before everyone goes, I want to shout out a few YouTube channels that I think everyone will benefit from getting to know, especially when it comes to the fighting game space. See you next time.